Welcome to The Road Ahead, the official monthly podcast of the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association. I'm your host, Dan Johnson, president of the WMCA, and I'm very excited to welcome you to our very first episode. This podcast is a brand new way for us to connect with our members, industry partners, and anyone with an interest in the trucking industry as we shine a spotlight on the people, trends, and topics shaping transportation across Wisconsin and beyond. But before we jump in, we'd like to thank our sponsor for today's episode, J.J. Keller and Associates. Running a safer, more compliant fleet is the best way to reduce your risk, and that's what J.J. Keller is specialized to help you accomplish. For more than 70 years, J.J. Keller has been the trusted partner for carriers of all types and sizes, simplifying DOT compliance, improving driver safety, and streamlining day-to-day operations. From fleet technology solutions to best-in-class training, professional services, safety supplies, and much more, J.J. Keller and Associates provides the resources, expertise, and confidence you need to protect your operation from risks on the road ahead. Visit jjkeller.com to discover their expertise and learn more. And speaking of J.J. Keller and Associates and expertise, our guest today is Mr. Tom Bray, who recently retired from J.J. Keller after a long career helping fleets navigate the complex and ever-changing world of regulations, safety, and compliance. Tom sat down with our very own WMCA Safety Program Coordinator Kim Conradt to talk about what's on the horizon for the trucking industry, what's coming our way in 2026 and beyond, and what carriers should be paying attention to right now.
Hey, Tom, for listeners who may not know you, can you give us a quick overview of your background and your time with J.J. Keller?
Sure. Full background, many years ago, I got out of the Army, went to college, and ran off and drove truck over the road for 8 years. And then transitioned up to the fleet safety side of the administrative part of trucking. Ultimately became a safety director at a major carrier. And then I transitioned into J.J. Keller, where I was a subject matter expert. I worked on manuals, online products, training products, did customer support, customer seminars, customer auditing and things, all kinds of different things while I was with J.J. Keller, and I retired just after being there just over 20 years. So that's in a nutshell.
Awesome. When you look at the current priorities coming out of the Federal Motor Carriers Safety Administration, what stands out to you the most?
The driver focus. They're focusing in on drivers in a lot of ways. The English language proficiency, making sure drivers, have adequate English skills, and that's part of the roadside inspections and the out of service criteria, where it's always been a regulation, but now it's part of the out of service criteria. The focus on the CDL training, making sure these drivers that are going to these entities that are on the training provider registry are getting the training they need to come out of there operating safely and understanding what they need to do and understand the regulations. So there's a lot of the driver initiative stuff that's going on. It's good to see. It's something that really needs to be paid attention to, because the driver is the most important link in the chain as far as a motor carrier's operation. If that driver's not doing the job right, there's going to be a bad outcome.
So there's always a lot of noise around the FMCSA updates. What are the changes carriers actually need to pay attention to right now?
Right now, the biggest changes that are either recent or coming are going to be the medical card changeover, which is still an ongoing issue, where your drivers, now they don't have to take the medical card to the state unless they're in one of the states that hasn't implemented it yet. And so there's states that just haven't got around to it yet. So if you're in those states, your driver still needs to take it in. If you're not in those states, you still need to run an MVR and verify that your driver has that valid medical listed on their MVR. So that's probably the biggest thing that's impacting carriers right now as far as recent changes. As far as upcoming changes go, they've got a lot of things that they're working on, but none of them are going to be huge impact. They want to reduce some of the drug testing, so they want to test for fentanyl and norfentanyl. It's not really a huge deal, but it could impact some carriers. There's the rail grade crossing. It's going to change the way some carriers handle railroad tracks and railroad crossings. They want to get rid of the rear impact guard requirement. That's going to make it so that if you have a trailer that doesn't have that rear impact guard label, you're not going to get a violation anymore. So there's a lot of things like that where they're not huge deals, but when you put them all together, it makes a significant number of changes, which might make a difference.
when I think about some upcoming rules or proposal, there's some that are flying under the radar but could have a big impact. And I'm actually thinking about the rescheduling of marijuana. How do you think that will impact our industry?
It's gonna be it's gonna be an interesting impact depending upon how it gets handled. Because the first step, you Department of Drug Enforcement Agency has to downgrade it from a Schedule 1 drug, which cannot be used for any purposes legitimately. They're a controlled substance. You can't have them. You can't use them. As far as a commercial driver, it's an automatic positive end result if you get caught with that in your system during a drug test. Well, if they downgrade that to Schedule 3, okay, now can it be prescribable? That's going to make a huge difference in the industry, because if DEA says, yes, we'll make it a Schedule 3, it can be prescribed, but DOT doesn't make the matching changes and leaves marijuana specifically in Part 40, and carriers still have to follow, motor carriers in 382 still have to follow Part 40. That means that even though DEA says it's okay, you're going to have drivers getting dinged and ending up with positive test results and all the consequences. So it's one of those things that's just below the radar, because it's kind of an administrative thing going on in the background, but it's going to make a huge impact because your drivers are going to hear, oh, this is now a Schedule 3 drug. I can use it, especially if I get a prescription for medical, I'm good to go. But if DOT hasn't updated their rules and that accompany that say that, or update the rules to say that, you're going to have drivers getting hit with positive drug tests and being completely shocked because I just read that marijuana is now legal. I could get a prescription for it. I got a prescription for it, but now you're telling me that I failed a drug test and I've got to get off of the road. So there's going to be right now it's below the radar, but once that starts happening, carriers are really going to have to pay attention. Okay, where exactly are we at in this process? Is DOT now on board and saying, yes, this is legal provided the driver has a prescription and can present it to the MRO and the lab says it's positive? So there's a lot that's got to happen, and all that's kind of like just below the surface going on that is going to make a big difference to us in the industry when it pops up and comes above water.
So are there common misconceptions you still hear from carriers about FMCSA rules that you wish you could clear up once and for all?
Yeah, just a general comment here. Just because my brother's cousin's friend's husband, who's a trooper, said I could do it, doesn't mean you can do it. I want to kind of lean back on my long ago past, and you'll smile when you hear this name. When somebody says that to you, I always remember what Bill Vickery, the old administrator from Wisconsin, used to say. What does the rule say? And you read the rule, it's like, well, okay, now you can't do that. That's what it says there. Exactly. The one that I like to hear about, well, drivers are always allowed, if they can't find a parking spot, they can drive an extra 15 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, half hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours. And it's like, okay, where's that in the rules? Where does it say that in the rules? Well, it doesn't, but what does it say in the rules? So there's the big thing that's out there that carriers need to understand. The rules are the framework. They establish what you can and can't do. If somebody tells you, well, I heard from this person over here that says that that's flexible and you can do that, and they really don't enforce it that way, fall back on it. What does the rule say? And if you want reinforcing that that's the rule, just look at the roadside inspection data and the auditing data. It's likely what somebody's telling you is going to turn up in there as a violation. So that's probably the biggest single thing.
I always think to the 2-hour extension for adverse conditions, which, nowadays it's not like we don't know when the snowstorm is coming or when there's going to be a snowstorm. So that really doesn't classify as an exemption for the 2 hours. So what are some of the exemptions that would qualify?
Yeah, and that's one that both I know you and I have dealt with over the years. It's like, well, if it's something that could have been predicted, if they were saying yesterday it's going to snow today, so it all goes back to when the driver was dispatched on the assignment and when the driver started their day today. If they could have known about it, they can't claim it's an adverse driving condition. However, things like, okay, they said it was going to snow, but nobody said they were going to pile up 27 cars and close the highway. So now you're dealing with an accident that was unforeseen, unpredictable, unknown. We being from Wisconsin, We just had this a couple of weeks ago where they said it's going to rain. It didn't rain. It froze. It was freezing rain. It was ice and snow everywhere. That was something that changed in a matter of 15 minutes. That would have qualified as an adverse condition if you're on the road and got stuck in that. So those are the things you're looking at is those sudden changes in weather that were unexpected, that crash that happened. The construction zone's another one. Normally, no, you can't call a construction zone an adverse driving condition, even if it delays you an hour. But if there's a pile up and they close the road for an hour, now you've got an adverse driving condition because you couldn't have predicted that. Expecting delayed traffic in construction, yes. Crash closing the road for an hour, not predictable, not expected.
And what's the best way for the driver or the carrier to notate that, so that they don't come down if they get an audit that this driver did this exemption on this day?
That's a great question because it kind of spills over into other things. What they need to do is the driver needs to put a note on their log that, used adverse driving condition because of a crash on Interstate 94 in Dane County, Wisconsin at this time. So just a brief comment on that log, and in an electronic log, you put it in the annotations or the comment field on that day, but put a note in there, just detail what exactly it was that delayed it. The thing that a lot of people don't understand, you need to do that for all the exemptions. If you use any of the other exemptions that are out there, we're talking about, adverse driving conditions, but if you're using, I'm just trying to think when I have to, or using the big day exemption, the 2 hour 395.10, you're using that one, same thing. You need to put a comment in explaining this is why. Because what happens whenever the company sees the log or a roadside inspector sees the log or an auditor sees the log, what they see is that you are over hours. That's what that log is showing. You went to, you had 11 hours of driving, you drove 12 and a half. Okay, why? Well, then there's a comment there saying, stuck behind an accident in I-94 in Dane County at this date and time, delayed used adverse driving conditions, or, used 16-hour exemption at 395.10. So there's an explanation on that log about why those extra hours are there. Everybody's going to look at that and say, oh, that makes sense. Because during an audit or investigation, a roadside inspection, the investigator may look and see, okay, look at the news and see if something happened around that time. If it did, okay, we're good to go. If there's no comment in there, it's just an outright violation as far as everybody that looks at that log is concerned. So whether it's the adverse driving conditions or any one of the others exemptions, it's going to put you over a limit. You got to put that. That is a requirement to put that comment on there explaining why you were over hours.
This episode of The Road Ahead is brought to you by WMCA Diamond Club Plus member J.J. Keller and Associates. For more than 70 years, J.J. Keller has been the trusted partner for carriers of all types and sizes, simplifying DOT compliance, improving driver safety, and streamlining day-to-day operations. For more information, visit jjkeller.com today.
So from your experience, how much of compliance is about having the right policies versus actual executing them day to day?
Oh, it's huge. You got to have the policies in place so that the drivers know the expectations. They know what you want them doing. You can't have a policy that says, I just want you to obey every regulation out there. That's nice, but that's not a realistic goal. I need to have policies that say, okay, drivers, I don't want you going over the 11 hour, the 14 hour, the 70-hour limit. I don't want you violating these. I don't want you doing this. I don't want you doing that. I want you doing this instead. So that's, then to go to your question, that's step one. The drivers know the expectations. This is what I want you doing as my driver. Step two then is having that mechanism in place that if you as a driver aren't doing that, I'm going to bring you in, sit you down and say, hey, this is our policy. This is what we want you doing. Why aren't you doing it? And we got to work on this. Let's get better at what we do here. So you have to have both pieces in place. You can't get by with one or the other. Because one of the worst things as a driver, and Kim, you know this from your experience, I get brought in and chewed out for something that I didn't even know I was supposed to be doing. That is just so frustrating as a driver. So you can't have one without the other. I, as a driver, need to know what your expectations are. When I haul this load, this is how I expect you to secure it. I can't just bring you in and chew you out because you didn't secure it this way when I never told you what that way was.
So having a company safety policy in place that everybody signs off on all the way up to the owner the president or whatever is probably one of your key pieces of recommendation to keep you out of trouble and to keep all the drivers in compliance, and then everybody knows what they expect.
Yeah, and as a safety person in the past, one of the most frustrating things to deal with was when you had the rogue dispatcher. And I don't know if you've ever encountered this or not, Kim, but you have a
Maybe
great
once or twice.
you have a great safety policy. The drivers understand it, and they follow it. But you have this dispatcher that's out there. You don't have to do that because you work for me and I say do this. And next thing you know, you've got all kinds of problems. So yeah, having everybody on board with the safety protocols and your safety policies and procedures, and making sure that those dispatchers understand this is our policy. These are the limits we have to follow. This is how we have to do it. And like you mentioned, sign here, because you want the same thing with your dispatchers and your maintenance supervisors, whoever else interacts with the drivers, that you don't want to be chewing them out for things they didn't know. So you make sure they know the policy, they've signed off on it. Yes, this is what's expected of me. So when I do need to bring you in and talk to you about it, you understand what we're talking about.
So if you could leave carriers with one piece of advice when it comes to the FMCSA compliance, what would it be?
Make sure your drivers know, and kind of leaning back on what we were talking about, make sure your drivers know what's expected of them. Your drivers deal with all kinds of stuff out there, especially if you have road drivers that are out for, 5, 10, 14 days at a crack. They're getting exposed to all kinds of stuff, oh, they don't do that, they don't do this is what you need to do, and it may not match what you do. So make sure your drivers have clear expectation. They know your expectations and they clearly understand them. This is how we want you doing your job when you work here. And I'll say this about the drivers that I worked with over the years, because the companies I did work with were good at that. If you're going to drive this color truck for us, you are going to do this, and this is what we expect of you. You do that, we're going to treat you well, we're going to pay you well, you're going to enjoy working here, we're going to appreciate having you work here. Let's do that. And that's probably the biggest single thing. This is how we operate. This is what we do. These are the regulations. We have to do these things. Here's the additional things we do to make sure we're following those regulations. Do you understand that? If you do that, we're going to be great. So that to me is the biggest single key to making a safety program function, is making sure that drivers understand what you expect of them.
Stuff happens. Stuff happens every day. No matter how we try to do everything right, something happens. You might get an audit. You might get an FMCSA auditor coming in. And I think sometimes there's a misconception about the inspectors and the auditors like being mean and want to find something wrong and want to do something wrong. And I wish that that's another area that people just need to know. Yes, no, here's what I did. This is what happened. I'm sorry. We're working on it. Do you see that helps, or what kind of attitude when an auditor does come in would be the best?
Yeah, that's you touched on one of the things. It's like they're going to come in, they're going to beat us up, and they're going to clean our clock, and they're going to, only if you give them things to work with. I mean, if they come in, here's a coffee, here's a donut, here's no joke intended there. Here's a donut, here's a place for you to work. You got any questions, come find me. I'll get you the information you need. Let's go through with this. Let's do this. If they do find something, they find something. And one of the things is there are so many regulations out there, and I know you've gone through audits, I've gone through audits. They're going to find something because you've got, X number of drivers running around every day doing their thing. Then every now and then they make a boo-boo. They're going to find it. But what they're looking for, and what you need to have tucked in the back of your mind and understand, okay, we found this, we found this, we found this, we found this, but everything's cool. Because what they are looking for is that carrier that has the practices, the common operating thing where they're not obeying the regulations. That's what they're looking for. If they see that you are trying to comply, but you made some mistakes, yeah, here's your $500 fine as a company, drive around the road, here's your $50 fine, go on, have a good life. That's normal. That's going to happen. What they don't want to see is that you really didn't care, whether you're driver or company. You didn't care. You were just out there doing your thing, and however it got done, it got done. Not a big deal. And they come in, they find 27 violations and 30 logs. They're going to catch on that you are the one that they need to be a little harsher on. So that's the key. I don't know many carriers that have ever gone through a perfect audit, but I know ones that have gotten violations and walked away just fine at the end of the day. So that's the important thing, is just remember, they're there to do their job, you're there to do yours. And if you're doing what you need to do on a day-to-day basis, going back to what we were talking about, your drivers understand what you want them doing. They're doing it that way the vast majority of the time. When they have to make an independent decision, they're making the right decision because they know what you would want them doing. Yeah, they'll find violations, but they're only going to find a few of them, and it's not going to be a big deal for them. And that's where you want to be at the end of the day.
Tom, thanks for sharing your perspective. And any final thoughts for our listeners as they navigate another year of regulatory change?
Stay safe. It's all about safety. The safety regulations give you the framework to work within. Okay, I can't have my drivers drive more than 11 and 14. I got to inspect my equipment at these intervals. If you've got the framework, you have to work within. Go beyond that. Make sure your drivers understand, hey, I don't want you driving tired. If your truck burps, looks funny, says something strange to you, get a hold of maintenance. So take that next step and get into safety as a fleet, not just compliance with the safety regulations.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Tom. We appreciate it and appreciate all you do for the association.
Glad to do it.
Thank you, Tom and Kim, for that very insightful conversation. Tom has been a trusted voice in the trucking industry for decades, and we're grateful he was able to join us for our very first episode. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed today or explore WMCA safety programs, events, and initiatives, please visit us online at witruck.org. You can also subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode of The Road Ahead. And speaking of events, we got a few events coming up in February and March that we hope you can join us. Our first one is our President's Safe Driver Club Luncheon, which will be February 21st. That's a Saturday at Lake Lawn Resort in Delavan, Wisconsin. This is an opportunity where we recognize and honor the safest drivers in Wisconsin, have a wonderful lunch and some guest speakers. Again, that's Saturday, February 21st in Delavan. The second one is March 14th, Safe Drivers Club Luncheon, which will be at the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin Dells. The Safe Drivers Lunch will be similar to the one in Delavan, where we honor and recognize our safe drivers. And then later that evening, we will be having our annual safety banquet, where we recognize the 12 drivers of the month and choose our Driver of the Year, which is a very exciting program. We have the Department of Transportation Secretary Christina Borman will be on hand, along with other dignitaries, to thank and honor our drivers who keep us all safe out there. So please go to witruck.org/events for more information about those events that are coming up. That is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you again for tuning in and supporting the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association. And again, thank you to our initial sponsor, J.J. Keller and Associates. Go to jjkeller.com to learn more about their services. And until next time, I'm Dan Johnson, and we will see you on the road ahead.